The Brazilian people are incredibly friendly, incredibly loving, very outgoing, very talkative. They love to hug you. They love to touch you, grab your arm. So when you go to church, you're not like shaking hands. You hug everyone. Men will try to kiss you on the cheek. You have to tell them not to. So very loving, very warm, and that's something that I greatly admire about the Brazilian people is they just make you feel so loved and cared for. Some things that you, also something that I really love about them is they're very open. So you would go in to teach a lesson, and more often than not, they want to share their life story. They want you to meet their cousins and their aunts and uncles. So they're very family oriented. They often have meals with all their family. Their family lives close together. They all get together a lot, and they want you to meet all of them and talk to all of them, which was great. They also, so we didn't have dinner like you do in the States for meals. You have lunch in the state or in Brazil, and so we would have lunch with different families every single day. So it's kind of like a siesta. Everyone takes 2 hours and they go and have lunch. So you go and eat rice and beans and meat every single day, and everyone will always say come mais, which means eat more. So then you just keep eating more. And you have to be pretty like, no, I don't want any more. No, I'm really okay, but it was so good to get them to not feed you anymore. They don't want you to do their dishes. They want to just serve you and be hospitable to you. So my companion would always have me distract them so that she could try and do the dishes, but they usually stop you. They don't let you go any further. Transportation in Brazil is kind of crazy. So you just walk across the street, you run across the road, you hope you don't get hit because people don't really stop. They just go really fast. When we were knocking doors, we would clap outside. You don't like knock on the door or ring the doorbell, you just clap really loudly outside. Something that is just funny for Americans who are learning Portuguese is you go there and you'll say, posso ter copo de água, which means can I have a cup of water? But for some reason in Brazilian culture, saying posso ter is rude and you're not supposed to do that. And so you have to learn to say, me dá copo de água? Will you give me a cup of water? So that was something that a lot of American missionaries got made fun of because they were always saying that incorrectly. Something else that's kind of funny is Americans often say sorry. And so in Portuguese, because I was so used to just saying, sorry that happened to you. Oh, sorry, that's so hard. I would say desculpa, which means sorry. Well, Brazilians don't say sorry that happened. It doesn't make sense to them. And so they would often tease me about saying sorry because it didn't make any sense to them. So Brazil originally was full of indigenous tribes. It's like Native Americans lived there. Eventually, Europeans, mainly people from Portugal, came to Brazil and settled the land, and they started to build cities. This was a couple 300, 400, 500 years ago, but they started to intermix with the indigenous tribes that were there. And then because Portugal had started to migrate to Brazil, they also imported slaves from Africa. So then all of a sudden you had African people who were being used as slaves. So then they started to intermix. Well, because Portuguese people from Portugal had started to live in Brazil, other Europeans started to move there. So you can see a lot of people from Italy, a lot of people from Germany. When my grandpa served his mission, he served in the southern half of Brazil, and it was only 2 missions at the time, and this was back in the 1950s. He actually spoke German on his mission because there were whole colonies where people only spoke German. So that was only 60, 70 years ago, and there are still places where they celebrate holidays from Germany or Italy, or Holland even, which is kind of unique. And then really interestingly, in the last 30 or 40 years, Brazil and Japan started to have immigration to each other's countries. And so a lot of colonies were Japanese. And so so my mission president, President Kuseki is actually a Japanese name. So Brazil is a really neat place because there's such a unique, diverse group of people who have intermixed and who now live there. And so this culture, while Latin American in some ways, European in some ways, African, Japanese, and indigenous as well, it all sort of becomes this big melting pot, which was really neat to be a part of.